This is the video part for assignment 2. Part A was to make a math game that took two random numbers and a random operator, formed an equation, and then asked the user to guess the answer. And then it would also keep score. Anyway, so here at the start, we're importing a couple of libraries. We're also importing the ability to use Google Drive. And here I'm defining a variable. So the assignment asked that there be a save file that can be read to give the user the previous score that's stored in the file. So I did that with a try except statement. So here it tries to open the score.txt file with read permissions, and it reads what's on it as into this variable. If it finds the file, it'll test what's in it. So it'll basically say if the length of str score is less than 1, which means that the file is empty, then print welcome to your math game. Because that would mean it's a new game because there's no score there. Else if max score equals this variable here that is read from the file, then I'm happy to see here again your last score was, and then it'll update max score with the saved number. So in the exceptions, these exceptions, they almost work like a if statement, but dedicated to exceptions. So they're sort of hierarchical. So when it tries to open the file, if an exception happens, it's going to check this one first. So it's going to say basically if this exception was a file not found error, do this, which in this case it's just going to print no file found. It'll make one for you, welcome, and then it will continue with the game. If it's not this one, it'll say if it's an OS error, do this, and then in this case it'll say file not found error. Sorry, file found, but an error reading the file. The assignment didn't ask for this, but I just thought it would be, that the user should know that the game's going to continue, but their score will be 0. There'll be no save loaded. And then lastly, this exception here is going to catch any other exception. And then it'll let the user know an unexpected error occurred. It's not very specific because this is not very specific. And then again, I just thought it would be better to let the user know that the game is going to continue, but their score will be 0 and it's a brand new game. So this is a function. This forms the main part of the game. So basically, it'll take a random choice of a range of 1 to 10. It says 11 here, but it's everything lower than 11, so that means 1 to 10. And it'll take that random choice and store it in num1, and then it'll do the same here and store it in num2. This is a dictionary, which is going to work kind of the same, only this time it's going to take a random number between 1 and 3, store it in operator, but that random number, if it's a 1, it'll be a plus sign, if it's a 2, it'll be a negative sign, and if it's a 3, it'll be multiplication. And then here, eval. Eval can take a string formed like this, turn it into an equation, and then find the answer. So it's going to do that. It's going to store the answer in the variable answer. And then here is where the user is going to be asked the question and given the opportunity to answer. So they need to answer as an integer. So this try except statement is going to take their input, try and convert it to an integer. If it can't, because it's a letter or it's empty or whatever, then it'll throw an exception, at which point, the program will let the user know it was an invalid entry, then continue, which will make it loop back around and try it again. If it was an integer, the program will break, or sorry, it'll break out of the loop, which will bring us to this if statement. The if statement is going to compare the user's guess with the answer. If they're the same, it means they got the question right, and it will say, congratulations, you are a pro. It'll also then update max score with +1, and then return, which is actually down here. Else, which means they got the question wrong, it'll say what the actual question, the answer was, and then it'll update max score with a -1 as a penalty for the user getting the question wrong. So this is an infinite loop. So the first thing it does is it calls that function to give the user a question and let them make a guess. Once they've made their guess, it'll return, and when it returns under the function call, so it's actually returning here user input. So here it's an input, and it's asking the user if they want to continue. If the user puts in a lowercase or an uppercase y, it'll continue, which means it'll loop back around and then call that function again, which will generate another number, etc. Sorry, generate another equation. If the user doesn't enter anything or enters any other character, then it'll end the game and it'll print "Thank you for playing. You got," and show what the current max score is. And then it'll print "Wow," and then break. It'll break out of this loop, which will take us down to It'll take us down to here. So here is where it's going to save the max score variable in a file called score.txt. So it's going to open it here, and then here it's just saying write that variable to the file as a string. And then part B was a game to solve quadratic equations. A quadratic equation is made up of 3 numbers, which are A, B, and C. So in the case of the program, the user is going to get the ability to input those 3 numbers. So here I had to import math because I'm using square root later in the program. Here's just a welcome message. Here's another message just to say what a quadratic equation looks like. So here is the 3 while loop, try except statements for getting the user input for the 3 numbers. Now, in a quadratic equation, number A cannot be 0. So there's a if statement to actually make sure that it's not 0 here. But first, it's going to take the input. It's going to try and convert it to an integer. If it's a space or a character or empty, it's going to throw an exception, which is going to tell the user invalid entry. It's going to loop back around, try it again. If it was actually an integer, it's going to check to see if it was lower than or higher than 0. Positive and negative numbers are allowed. If it is, it'll break and continue on. It'll break out of the loop and continue on. But if it's a 0, then it'll continue the loop. It'll let the user know that the value cannot be 0, and then it'll loop around and try it again. On number B and C, so on number A, this is a -5. Now, because it's at the start of the equation, you kind of want that negative right beside the number like this. But in the numbers in the middle of the equation, you want a space between it like this. So a positive number doesn't have a decoration, and a negative number does have a decoration, which is the dash. However, the dash is right beside the number. So in order to get around this, I did this if statement. So this is basically saying if it's 0 or above, which 0 or above is a positive number, or at least doesn't have a decoration, what it's going to do is formulate a string where it's going to have the plus sign plus a space, then the actual variable stored in num_b, and it's going to store that as a string in num_b string. If it was negative, so the negative has the decoration, but the thing is it's right beside the number like this -1 that you can see here. So the only way I thought of to get around that was to convert the number to its exact positive opposite. So let's say it was -7. If I multiply it by -1, then it becomes +7, which +7 no longer has a decoration. And then I formulate my string with a negative sign, dash, plus space, plus the number stored in num_b opposite. And then I do the same for number c with the same if statement. And then when it comes to concatenate the sentence, as you can see, I get the spaces before the numbers, which looks much better. Here's the function that actually finds the discriminant. This is the main, I guess, the main part of the program that solves the answer. So here, first calls the function discriminant. Discriminant is going to create this variable discrim. So when it goes back up here, it'll just say discrim equals and then the equation, which is num_b, num_b, num_a, and num_c are all the numbers that the user input. And then it'll return discrim. So the way a quadratic equation works is if the discriminant is a positive number higher than 0, you'll get two real answers. So one is a negative answer and one is a positive answer. And so this is going to create those two answers and store them in the variables x1 and x2. And this is the equations that'll do that. Here, because later on the program asks you to store this sentence and actually this sentence in a save file, I decided to make the string into a variable and then print just the variable. And then same here, it just makes storing the string in a variable it's just easier later on when it comes to writing the file. Anyway, so then that was if it was higher than 0. If it's equal to 0, then you'll only get one real answer, and it's going to do that with this equation and store it in x1. Same again, it'll take this string and put it into the variable output 2, and then print output 2 to let the user know. And then if the discriminant it ends up being a negative number, then you actually end up with two complex numbers. One's a real number and one's an imaginary number. However, the assignment only wanted us to show that that's what happened as opposed to actually working the answers out. So that's what it's going to do here. And then after that, it's going to save that to a save file. So it's going to try and open the file quadratiq.txt with write plus privileges. Again, if the file doesn't exist, we'll create the file. And then here it's going to write the string variable that's stored in output 1 and then with a line break, and then the string variable stored in output 2, and then exit the program. And that is it. I don't know what else I can say about it. I hope I explained it okay. Thanks.